I decided to revisit Warhammer Battlesector recently, a game that I completely sucked at when it first came out. I wanted desperately to understand what I was doing wrong, so I tried it 3 different times, and the first 2 were kind of disastrous. I just didn't get it. I don't know what it was. It was obviously me, but this last try, I should say, I had a better grasp of a ton of things, and I just ended up having a lot more fun. Hello, this is Robert with Society Case Files. I'm coming at you with another Warhammer video game revisit. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. Battlesector came out in 2021, and since then they've released a number of factions like the Demons of Khorne, the Sisters of Battle, the Necrons, Orcs, and the Tau. And in December, they're adding the Imperial Guard, so it kind of came back on my radar. And I've just been itching to make this game work, so I loaded it back up. I'm not sure how they decide which factions to throw in or work on, but they've done some good work adapting them so far. And they all look cool, their tech trees feel appropriate to the group, and quite frankly, I think they just do a good job making this game. Unfortunately, they don't add corresponding campaigns to the factions, so you'll pretty much be relegated to the Planetary Supremacy, Skirmish, Multiplayer, or the Chaos Horde mode. There's some user creations as well, but I didn't dive into those, and you can read that as I tried to figure out how to make them work for about 14 seconds and couldn't figure it out. But supposedly there are some campaigns out there made by users that went through and did hopefully cool stuff. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but there's another way to experience the game, I guess. The one campaign that the company made is for the Blood Angels, and it's about as sufficiently dramatic as you'd imagine. It's got great cutscenes, crazy voice acting. All around, I really like it so far, and it's definitely worth playing through. I wouldn't say it necessarily teaches you the game very well, though. If you're looking for that kind of thing, then you're probably going to be a little disappointed. But it's not super complicated. Overall, it does start you off with a lower number of forces, which is kind of nice because then you can get eased into having larger groups when you play the other styles. So like in Planetary Supremacy, you've got a big map and you fight against 2 AI opponents, and each turn you attack a new spot on that map, which has resources that you can use to continue the campaign. So for example, you start off with like 1,500 is your limit for your army points. And then as you take additional zones, some of those will add 100 points here, 200 points there, and allow you to take more units or field more units as you continue the fight. The objective of a Planetary Supremacy is to march all the way across the map and destroy the enemy bases. And of course, they want to do the same to you. So along the way, you fight the other factions that aren't the main enemies. So in my case, I was fighting Necrons and the Demons of Khorne. They give you a bunch of cool choices to modify the experience. Like you can change the landscape and decide that it's more wet or dry. You can choose to be able to fight allied factions, and you can adjust the difficulty to some extent. There's a few options. It looks like it's got a ton, but really when you deep dive, there aren't that many. You have access to the tech tree, which is really cool. You can completely change the way your characters work and add things along the way. So for example, with the Sisters of Battle, you don't start out with them, but after a few wins, you can get the Paragon war suits. You could get the Immolator. You get a ton of cool stuff. You just have to play through the game to get the points to buy them. One of the things I like about the Planetary Supremacy is that it's a little bit more laid back in the sense that after you finish a battle, you go back to the big map, you do your reinforcements, you mess around with your tech tree. It's not quite as intense as the Demonic Incursion mode, which is what I'm about to talk about. All around, I think that Planetary Supremacy is a lot of fun. It kind of reminds me of the old Dawn of War, but of course, when you get into the action, it's all turn-based. So anyway, let's move on to that Demonic Incursion since I brought it up. It's basically a wave-based mode where you have to hold out against hordes of Khorne. They give you some time between waves to bolster your forces. You've got a limited number of resources and reinforcements, but ultimately the odds are stacked against you from the very beginning. There's even an infinite wave mode where it just won't stop until you die, which might take a long time considering what I'm about to say. When you pick your faction, you also pick how many points you want to spend on your army, anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000. And when you look at a 3,000 point army in this game, you've got some pretty nasty units that you can field. And I think it might take a long time. Unless they just start sending swarms of demon lords at you, you can probably go through several of these waves without too much trouble. But there's only so much you can do for so long before they finally do overwhelm you. So it's kind of one of those things that it's just something fun to do, just to see how far you can get, test your skill. I think that eventually, considering that it is so stacked against you and the fact that you will eventually lose, it doesn't feel as appealing to me as doing a planetary supremacy where you've got a finite objective that makes a lot of sense. The horde mode does end eventually unless you do infinite, but still, I don't know. That stuff doesn't work as much for me, but I can see how it would be fun for others. All that color aside, this game's pretty much just boiling down to turn-based combat. There are other objectives to do during the campaign, things like secure a base or hold a point or take a unit to specific points and have them do stuff. But really at its heart, you're just blasting enemies with dice rolls, and it does come down to RNG sometimes. And that can be a little frustrating depending on what's going on. The game does offer some powers that allow you to modify those rolls or at least bolster your chances. So it's not all about RNG, thank goodness, because quite frankly, that can get really annoying really fast. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I found it insanely difficult the first few times I played. I just couldn't get my head around the way that you should move your characters, how Overwatch worked, how to approach different enemies, who to hit them from first, and that kind of thing. But once I got back to my turn-based combat roots from, like 500 years ago, and I screwed my head on straight, I kind of figured out where I was going wrong. And just that seed allowed me to take it to the next level and really see that it was a lot less complicated than I was making it. And so really, it just came down to some nuances. So for example, when I was playing the sisters, a sister superior can buff units, and I just kept forgetting to do it. It may seem like that's super obvious, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't to me. And it really did make a difference. I could put her right in the middle of several units, buff them all, and they could survive better, and they were able to hit more often, and it just... I know I probably sound like I suck, and I do. I'm not saying I don't, but just using all of your powers, just imagine that. I was actually playing the game. Things like range, they really do matter. Even though you can shoot somebody from across a map or from a greater distance than the optimal range suggests, it's way better to just get into the optimal range. These are just things that maybe everybody takes for granted. I just didn't. So now, slightly in my defense, there are so many games where you have characters that have a whole bunch of powers or skills or whatever, and you don't end up actually needing them. In fact, they're just kind of there, and maybe they'd make a difference, but they don't really. But this game, they actually did, and I had to get it in my head that this wasn't one of those titles where you could just ignore what your characters can do and just brute force the fights. You really did need to use everything at your disposal, and I think that's actually kind of cool. I mentioned earlier that the campaign has objectives in the missions, things like having to secure a bunker or make a character do something like collect gene seed or something. It's really cool to force you to get moving, because in planetary supremacy, when the objective is to simply defeat the enemy and score a certain number of points, it was just easier to just leave all my characters standing still and put them in Overwatch until the enemy came for me. And then I would just blast them down, get them pretty low in health, and then when they were close enough, my characters could move in for the kill. And because they're AI and had no patience, they pretty much did it every time. It was just getting a little ridiculous. So anytime you have to get out of that comfort zone, the game actually really does start to shine, and you have to worry about some things like cover and moving characters around for range, and maybe you've got indirect fire that will work, but you've got to get your character up to a point that they can actually strike the target you want from afar. All around, I don't know. I think they did a great job. So it's been a lot of fun. And if you can just play a game for fun without having something to show for it, like cosmetics or an advancement or anything like you'd see in a live service game or an MMO, then I think Battlesector is definitely one worth trying. I like the graphics, the voice acting is insane, and the action can be a lot of fun. Now that I've got my head wrapped around it, I don't find it nearly as frustrating as I used to. And in fact, when bad things happen, it's generally my fault. And now that I can see why that's true, I find it a lot easier to accept and learn from my mistakes. Whereas before, I was just like, why did that happen? I don't even understand. And there's not really any way to find out. There's no feedback to go back to and look at and go, oh, I see. I did this wrong. So you just have to pay more attention, I guess. I don't know. All around, I'd recommend picking it up. I got it on sale, but Steam's at full price right now, which is $40. And that doesn't include any of the other factions either, which are actually pretty expensive. Each faction's around 15 bucks. GOG currently has the game for 20 bucks as of this recording, and all the DLCs a few dollars off as well. But if you can use Cheap Shark and find a better deal, then that would probably be the way to go. All right, I don't have a lot more to say about it, but I do want to know, have you tried Battlesector? Are there any points I should have covered? What factions have you tried? Are you excited about the Imperial Guard coming out? Leave me a comment and let me know. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye now.